As we were cozying in the last day, I had a conversation with my 9-year-old who you just saw, Phoebe. We were asking ourselves, where do birds go when it storms? Is this something you've given any thought to? Perhaps on really cold evenings, you're used to seeing them out in the branches, and especially when it's lush and there's lots of growth. But what about when things, especially in these parts, are bare? What if there are very cold winds like the ones we've seen in the last several days? What if there are rains? What if there is snow? But birds, we know they're hardy, and yet they are light, susceptible, and already challenged in the winter months to find themselves amongst cold places and to find the high calorie rich food that they need in order to survive. We learned in looking it up and researching that large birds try to find themselves in thick trees and dense shrubs. Small ones look for woodpecker holes like the one in the back at where our house is. In the summer and springtime, you can hear. Little did I know that they were making a way for their brethren to fend for themselves in the winter time. And also the small ones, those holes that during a blizzard, birds bear up wherever they can, seeking protection from heavy winds and whatever will burst amongst us. And as the storm ends, they emerge to look for food and for water, with the ability to melt snow with their own body heat and drink the runoff, the means for survival. As we think out to the Christmas story and the vulnerability of needing food and shelter, we hold the impression that there were crude circumstances that added to the hardship of what is already hard: birthing, securing provisions with a roof overhead, and providing a space where a new body, a new baby can be born. According to Luke, as we heard this evening, Mary gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for him in the inn. Mary, Joseph, and the baby would have found themselves in a corral or a cave, not a fancy looking barn, certainly nothing quite as fancy as what we've got. Manger comes from a Latin word, manducare, which means to eat, a feeding trough for animals, cows, and donkeys, and in this case, a nest for newborn Jesus. Oh, how hungry, for those of you who have known those wee early days and hours with an infant, how hungry they can be. We enter this world with this deep and unavoidable need to eat. Like a baby bird with mouth gaping open, far outstretched, baby Jesus was no doubt ready to receive the first gifts of his mother and family: a dry bed and a full belly. We have known, each of us, the deep hunger of infancy, of emergence into the world, and the worry of whether or not there would be enough for us. There'd be enough to keep our bodies satisfied. And some carry the trauma, perhaps you know it yourself, of having gone hungry or been food insecure. There's the fear that takes up residence in us if we cannot trust that there will be enough. Enough protection from life's storms, enough healthy food to help us grow, enough love to see us through childhood, enough love through middle life, enough love to shore up retirement. And so Christmas itself is a reminder of the responsibility that God endows with us every time fledgling life emerges, to share from whatever abundance we might have: shelter, food, love, with children, with youth, with adults finding their way to community, or simply within each of us as a new fledgling idea comes to us, a calling, that we will pursue it in order to honor God, even if it's a hungry calling. And we have to keep on listening and feeding, helping it to take flight. When I think of the vulnerability of crude circumstance, I think of my 2 little birds that flew up here just now. The ongoing desire to keep them safe, especially in the pandemic years we have just named, the ones that we have weathered. When we were looking for a name for our daughter, I was delighted that not only does Phoebe mean bright and shining, but there are also Phoebe birds. Easter, black, and says. Perhaps the birders in our midst are nodding. Generally a songbird known for its independence. And my son, now 6, James, named for his great-grandfather, now deceased. We call him Jay for short, often Jaybird. And oh, how Jay embodies the blue stellar's Jay. Cunning, quick, and prone to mischief. And then we happened to move to Columbia's Darting Bird Lane. The name my husband and I came to find embodied this nest that we have created, a fitting place not far from here. And at Christmas time, perhaps you know the traditions of your household, but each year since their birth, we give our children bird ornaments for the tree. Phoebe with any kind of bird, and Jay particularly gets owls and penguins. I remember a day nearby at Wild Lake over here, not far. It was in the fall, and there were 3 birders set up with their telescopes over by the boathouse. And they were perched looking out at an emerged bird there stationed off of the bank. And we edged closer, so curious. And the birder beckoned us forward. So enraptured was he with this sighting that he wanted to make sure and share it. And so we took turns, the 4 of us, each putting our eye up to the lens. You kind of have to hold one eye still and seeing magnified the majesty of that waterfowl just ahead. Now, I wish I remembered the name of what I was looking at, and the novelty of that birder's welcome and invitation is what I truly remember. To invite the children into the marveling of a species of which we knew not yet, to pause in the midst of our rumblings and runnings, and as so many of us have found in these last 2.5 years, to take an extra look at what nature has to provide for us. He could have just kept on looking, but he invited us over and beckoned us into that moment. I'm not an ornithologist, no bird watcher, no natural scientist. I just have my 2, and they're rather human at that. But I was enraptured with this sighting. I was enraptured by the way that the fragility of our ecosystem can support the fragile seeming little ones that are so very hardy. And I'm amazed at the people who take time to notice in their everyday, to find a bird, to download the app on their phone, to chart their sightings, and to let us all know about it. It's more than a hobby kind of interest and calling. We might recall the shepherds who suspended their nightly duties to show up to the manger when Jesus had been born. We can recall later the wise people from the east who heeded the stars and alighted on the doorstep of Mary and Joseph looking for the Christ child. People today crisscross the globe to get a look at a lilac-breasted roller or a bar-tailed godwit, each one a glimpse of the divine. And we are not so very different from them, the shepherds and the wise men and the birders. For we sit on the Christmas banks tonight, ready to witness new life in motion. There we be beckoned in to Bethlehem. For we are nourished and fed by this story each and every year. Some of us as eager as little birds, not to just open the presents under the Christmas tree, but to find ourselves around the Advent wreath and find again, yet again, that Christ is born. Christ is in us and with us. Through the Christ child, we feel the fleshy isness of God. We recall with fear and fascination the total dependence we have on God and one another. God is as resourceful as a mother bird. We see the Spirit at work partnering with Mother Mary. She scoops up every bit of love, feeds her young, and places him safely in the manger. And throughout each year, we recall the imperative we have to share the shelter, food, and gifts of Christmas with our community. Persons, organizations, and initiatives that the congregation support through the year that have made a difference as individuals and families face crises. The Route 1 Day Center, Help in homelessness joined with Bridges to Housing, Accountability, Affordability, Howard County Food Bank, Seeking Refuge, the Cold Weather Shelter, World Central Kitchen, and Agape House Ministries, just to name a few. As we look out to another year, we take the food that God extends to us. We come tonight to the communion table this evening, mouths and hearts outstretched to receive something to sustain us for the sacred that is still coming. We acknowledge on what can be a hard night. We come with the losses of loved ones deep upon our hearts. We carry these empty chairs, remembering who has been here. We remember the griefs of pandemic still fresh and continuing. We come with the divided fears of this nation. We come with a legacy of discrimination and racism. We come with the knowledge of war in Ukraine and around the globe. We come with the marginalization of the LGBTQIA community. We come with shifting weather patterns of climate change and the little birds that are so affected. We come on this holy night, daring to believe that the morsel that God yet brings for us would renew us and strengthen us for the work that is yet coming. In so doing, as we take this bread and dip it in the cup, we renew our role as mother birds to baby Jesus, stewards of the Christmas story. Alongside the Christ child, the one is to become the bread of heaven. We recall that all yearn to have sufficient shelter, enough to eat, and the love at the center of it all. We hope that one day Phoebe and Jay will carry with them the bird ornaments that they receive on our Christmas tree. We hope that one day they create a shelter of which they can lift up the family they might have coming, a reminder of the loving nest they come from as they create their own family shelter alongside the storms and the hardships. Thank you from a deep mama's heart on my behalf and of all those Casey parents out there for the way that you nourish and tend to the young ones in our orbits. It has been a tremendous story where the privileging of a baby's life in a time where life was especially fragile is the time to point us forward alongside our ongoing fragility into the places of our emergence. For we are the sacred ones on the banks looking out, able to see the mystery of the vine that exists not only on the bank that is yet far in the distance, but which resides in our holy hearts, we who are beloved and our fleshy isness of our Creator.